Hi, and welcome to the Serial Killers podcast. It's a podcast all about the pests, diseases and problems that affect arable crops. Each week we're going to do a deep dive into one of those particular problems. Hi Josie.
Hello.
So today's serial killer is the weed fescue. Okay. So
Yeah, also known as rat-tail fescue, the particular one we're looking at.
Yep. So there are loads of fescues, aren't there? How many different species?
450 species of grass called fescue.
Yep.
However, 3 to 4 of those species are cultivated as lawn grass, so it's not all evil.
No.
We do need fescues.
Yeah, and I think in pasture as well they're used for animal feed and hay. So
That's right.
They're very delicious if you're an animal. Or if you're a golfer, you use a lot of fescues on the fairways and the greens and the tees.
That's right.
Yep.
Because it does have very fine leaves.
Yep. I'll be playing on some fescue after we finish this podcast. I'll be heading off to the golf course. So, so the rat's tail fescue is not it's not really cultivated for pasture or for in horticulture because it's an annual, isn't it? That makes it quite unusual amongst
It's an
the
annual
fescues.
invasive grassweed.
Yeah. And its scientific name is Vulpia majorus.
That's right.
Yeah, I asked.
Vulpia,
Yeah, go on.
I would say, is probably a little bit Latin for fox, maybe.
Close.
Maybe.
A wolf.
Wolf.
Yeah, I asked Adrian Stockdale, author of Plant Names Simplified, the best-selling book, and he said, "Yep, it's named after wolf," and I have no idea why, even though it's
Well,
called.
maybe if it's a rat-tail fescue, because it does have dense one-sided panicles that hold a tremendous amount of seeds. It's fluffy, so looks like a fluffy tail, maybe.
Yeah, a wolf's tail. Maybe because maybe it's because it's on everything's on one side, like all the hairs of a wolf's tail are on one side, maybe. So yeah, it's a really good, interesting topic for a podcast because it's very similar to blackgrass, even though it's not related to blackgrass. So it's got loads of similarities, and one of them that is not is that it's distribution. So it's very common in the northeast of England, and that's how I first came to know about it because my customers in Northumberland and County Durham, the land of the Prince Bishops, they have got a real problem with rat's tail fescue, but no blackgrass. And then if you look at the distribution of rat's tail fescue, it's really disjointed. So it's not like one of these ones where you see it all in the southeast and then there's a line across the Midlands where it doesn't grow, or there's one where it's just in Wales, or it's just in the Highlands, or it's just in maritime locations. It's patchworked. So there's this big patch in the northeast, there's a big patch in South Wales, East Anglia, Devon, but then not most of Cornwall, but then in the Lizard Peninsula there is, Coventry, Watford and Reading, the Central Belt in Scotland, and then Inverness, and then nowhere else in between.
So it just seems to bob up wherever it feels like, really.
Yeah,
where
strange,
the conditions
isn't it?
are right.
Yeah, and it's a noxious weed, as you said. I always say pernicious, but it's the same as noxious. They're just synonyms.
It's supposed to be worse than blackgrass.
Yeah, that's debatable, I think. I mean, what are you saying about the glyphosate resistance? It's more glyphosate resistant?
If you're going to treat blackgrass with glyphosate, then if you're going to treat it, the rat-tail fescue, you have to apply it at a more robust rate to have any effect. So it's more resistant.
Yeah. Other things relating to blackgrass is it's not a close relative of cereals. So it's at the opposite end of the grass family tree to cereals. So you've got bromes and cereals at one end, and you've got blackgrass and the fescues at the other. It sheds its small seeds early, so very similar to blackgrass.
Flowering takes place in May to July, and then each plant can produce between 1,000 and 2,000 seeds.
Yeah,
and that is tremendous.
Yeah,
which then emerge in the autumn.
Yeah.
So that's substantial.
Yeah, and I think because it's so resistant to herbicides, you're thinking as soon as you harvest the previous crop, you then need to go on with a herbicide.
That's
and
right.
then also a pre-emergence herbicide as well. So
it can very quickly form a dense carpet.
I think that's one of the key characteristics as well. One of the identifications is this thick carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It only grows to about 70 centimetres in height, so you might not see it above your crop. So the only way to identify it really is to have a look in your crop and to see if there's a dense carpet of this grass competing with your main crop.
So unlike blackgrass, you can't use those toppers to just take off the seed heads. So it's got natural resistance to herbicides like blackgrass, but it's even worse. It loves clay soils, just like blackgrass. High number of seeds. It can appear from nowhere and just take over. And I think...
Well, it's spread from grass margins.
Yeah.
So as we've been seeing with every different grass we've looked at, they are all spread from the grass margins. So these grass margins, which are great, which keep the biodiversity, which the ecological balance and the predators, they also are responsible for a lot of issues with cereal crops.
Yeah. I read a good article in Farmers Weekly about this, and actually it wasn't behind a paywall for once when you go on a Farmers Weekly article, and it was this farmer called Nick Drever Smith from Hog Farm, and he was growing linseed, and it had just appeared from nowhere. And linseed is quite a wispy, it's not a dense crop, it's very shallow, and the other thing about it, because it's a niche crop, there are very few approved herbicides because chemical companies don't want to pay the expense of registering the use for these herbicides on these niche crops. And so he didn't have any weapons in his arsenal to control it. And so it really got out of control. And so he worked with his agronomist to look at it, and he was min-till. And obviously that's an added issue when it comes to these small seeded, low dormancy weeds. And so obviously the first thing you would normally say, the agronomist would say, is plough and plough deep.
That's right. That's the only thing that seems to be consistent with all the grasses that we've looked at, is that by ploughing deeply, at least 15 centimetre, will reduce your numbers. The seeds are not very viable. They will probably...
I think rotation as well.
Yeah.
Because if you're min-till or no-till, it's not really an option without a reset. So I'd say making sure you get good rotation, maybe mycorrhiza in there as well, because these are volunteer pioneer species. Spring cropping is obviously one we've talked about before for blackgrass and other weeds.
A good physical control is to plant your field in spring.
And then then this farmer had to move away from linseed, and then his other rotational crops, he moved to beans because then he had more herbicide options. So that was a good study. And then he said that ACCA's inhibitors, which are a common class of herbicides that work on ethylene, the ethylene signaling pathway, they weren't effective at all. So clodinafop, that was not effective. The ALS inhibitors, they were debatable effectiveness. And then the main ones that he was using was the pre-emergence residual flufenicet and glyphosate, obviously pre-drilling and after cutting. And that, as you say, at the highest possible rate allowed, because it was just it was not resistance in itself, but it just very, very tolerant.
It has a natural herbicide resistance.
Yeah, so it's not like it's developed that over time.
No.
Yeah.
It's naturally like that.
And it just regrows. Yeah. So that's rat's tail fescue. Have you got any other key facts about rat's tail fescue? No. I think it's not as big as blackgrass, so there's not as much information out there.
No.
Yeah.
It's the dense carpet which is the issue.
Yeah.
Because you can't see it.
Yeah. And then another fescue weed is annual ryegrass or annual meadowgrass. And that is a true fescue. So that's Festuca multiflorum. And that can be a pasture species. It can be a lawn species. And it's debatable whether the perennial and the annual are separate species or they're the same species, just different forms. But obviously an annual is going to be more prone to being a weed, and you're not going to want that in permanent perennial pasture or in horticulture. So it can be a crop or a cover crop or a weed, depending on the situation. What's the definition of a weed, Josie?
plant growing in the wrong place.
Yeah.
But according to the RHS, there are no weeds anymore.
or one definition is a plant you haven't found a use for yet. But if it's grown in your crop, it's probably always in the wrong place.
I can't understand why there's nobody out there that hasn't harnessed a weed and turned it into a crop. Because weeds...
Oh, there are.
Oh, is there?
There's loads, yeah. Fat hen was brought over by the Romans as a crop.
Yeah, that's like spinach, isn't it?
Yeah, but they grow it as a grain crop, as a non-cereal
Yeah, that's
grain.
more your quinoa, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's loads. There's dandelions.
Yeah, I
Dandelion
don't know.
bird. Do you know, I just got that scientific name wrong. It's not Festuca multiflorum, it's Lolium multiflorum annual ryegrass. Lolium is it's a model plant species, so there is quite a lot of information out there. So scientists trying to control it. If you go on Google Scholar and put Lolium in, then there'll be loads of information there, because it's a bit like Arabidopsis, another weed. They're actually, because they grow so fast and so quickly, they're the model plant species. So Lolium, especially the perennial version, is the go-to grass species if you're going to study grasses in plant science. Again, it's autumn germinating, and it's herbicide resistant. And it can be a host of wheat yellow leaf virus.
Oh, right.
So one of the number of diseases that can be transferred to your crop. So it's not just a case of outcompeting the plant for nutrients and light and water. It can be a reservoir that can be transferred by insect pests to your crop. And rat's tail fescue, that can be a host to ergot, but it's not the ergot that affects cereals. So we talked about blackgrass, and that can hold claviceps purpurea.
That's right.
Look at that knowledge I just remembered from one of our early podcasts, scientific name. So that could get the ergot that was in affected cereals, whereas this one is not transmissible to cereals, but it's a really nasty ergot.
It's a different shape, isn't it? Different size.
Yeah. And it's different fruiting bodies, but equally nasty if you, or I think even if livestock were to eat it. So you have to be careful. It's still very popular in pasture, and people don't try and get rid of it, even though it can hold this ergot. So that's something to be careful of. And then the loliums and the festucas, they've often got a ribbed leaf, and that's an easy way to identify them. So yeah.
Little bit of a controversial question here for you. So obviously by not tilling the land and not ploughing it, then we are effectively keeping all of the nutrients in the soil, and we're not disturbing those lovely horizons as such.
Yeah.
Do you think that is actually beneficial when it comes to growing cereal crops?
I think it can be, extremely. We're looking at it from totally a pest and disease perspective. So you also got to remember that if you can build up the biological community in the soil, then you can get the plant and the ecosystem to almost reject weeds.
Okay.
But it's not just a case of throwing the plough away.
Yeah.
There's other things you have to do. You look at inputs, encouraging them, cover crops and things like that. So
should we reintroduce ploughing then?
It depends. I would say I would describe ploughing as like a reset.
Okay.
So you know, like I could sell you a soil sterilant. Like I sell lime sulfur as a soil sterilant, but I don't advise its regularly used on farms. I say when it's all gone, bottoms up, then you apply the lime sulfur as a soil sterilant and start again, then apply the biology. And the same with ploughing. I think you can get things like perennial cereal crops and things like that now. Very popular, becoming more popular in America. But even then, pest and diseases build up, they need a reset.
It's your monocultures, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the things you can do, I've got a customer down in Cornwall, and they are looking at grazing their crop with sheep early in the spring. So they get a wheat crop, and then they think that has a pest and disease effect. But it might also affect, you've got this lovely fescue that we know animals love to eat.
Yeah.
Then that could actually be a good potential option on other farms around the country.
And then they're feeding the soil when they poop as well.
Yeah, I think it's a traditional technique where you herd the sheep onto your crop.
Yeah.
Obviously, there might be a yield there might be a yield benefit because you've got all these
Yeah.
sheep droppings, or it might be a severe yield penalty, depending on how much damage they do to the crop. So, but you've got to weigh that up to the fact that they might actually, have more meat if they've been eating tasty cereal crops. So,
Pros and cons.
yep. So that's the Festucas. We got any other top facts about Festuca, or are we
No.
all out?
No, I'm all out.
Brilliant. So next week we're going to go do sclerotinia. So one for the
Lovely. I
oilseed rape.
can't say that word. I'm going to have to keep practicing.
Sclerotinia.
It's got a load of screws in it.
Yeah. Maybe if I need an Eastern European co-host for the next one. Okay. Thank you very much, Josie.
Thank you.
And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please tell a farming friend and share the knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.